had like 4 cups of coffee this morning, so like it's going to be like really fast, hopefully. But I want to get on the same page real quick, just in case maybe you've missed a couple of weeks. And if you're new to Adventure, one of the ways we take notes here is we just take pictures of the screen. It's just easier, right? So get your phones ready, buckle up, here we go, all right? Power moves are simple everyday actions that accelerate God's mission to seek and save the lost. And everything that Jesus had, everything that Jesus used to make these kinds of power moves, you and I, we already have them. We have the same spirit, the same access to God the Father. We have the same invitation to the mission and movement of God to seek and save the lost. We have that already. It is available to us. And we have it because Jesus gives it to us. And so far, we've looked at kind of 2 power moves that Jesus made that we also are invited to make. Power move number 1 was change your geography. Like literally change your location. Why? Because proximity, moving closer to people who are broken, moving closer to people who are investigating Jesus, don't know Jesus, are lost without Jesus, proximity creates possibility. We see that Jesus, he actually moved his whole life intentionally. From Nazareth to this place called Capernaum, he put himself in close proximity to people who were socially oppressed, people who were financially taxed, people who were politically divided, people who were spiritually starving. Sound familiar? He moved himself in close proximity to point the way to the truth. Power move number 2 was what we talked about last week, is invest in a few. It's small circles lead to big impact. Our world says bigger is better. More influence, more reach, more crowds, all that kind of stuff is better. But Jesus takes this really counterintuitive approach to building a movement. Jesus knew that crowds might get more attention, but making ourselves accessible and available to a few by investing ourselves. And the resources that all of us have are time, energy, attention, and finances. No matter what those things may look like, they're all available to us. We have them in some form, right? We invest those in people. Why? Because that creates a movement. Crowds gain attention, but investing in a few is what creates a movement. But there's a tension in all of this that we have to navigate. And I myself have been in this place. Even as I've been studying for this and writing this, right? I've been navigating this tension myself because we read and we unpack the stories and the power moves that Jesus made in the Gospels, right? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They tell Jesus his biography. That's his life. And we read these moments that Jesus makes these power moves and we go, yes, that's good. That sounds awesome. And then we see the moment when Jesus looks at us and says, now it's your turn. And we go, no, not me. Sounds scary. Pick somebody else, Jesus. I think you've got the wrong person. See, we've all got this risk manager that exists and lives in our brains. And that risk manager starts sounding the alarms and we start talking about these power moves. It's too risky. The risk manager says, abort, like bail out. Because the truth is this, for every power move that Jesus equips us and qualifies us and empowers us to make, we often respond with justifiable excuses for why we can't in order to avoid the risks. What's at risk? If we change our geography to be in closer proximity to people who are lost, well, Brad, I could be rejected. Right? It might make things awkward. It might be weird. Is that scary? Is the idea or the possibility of being rejected, is that scary? Yeah. Is that comfortable? No. Are those real risks? Absolutely. But have you ever stopped to think about what would be at risk if you didn't intentionally put yourself in the path of those who are lost? The truth is, you might remove the possible risks of rejection and awkwardness in your own life, but you've also removed people from the possibility of meeting Jesus through you. Well, what's at risk if you invest in a few? What's at risk if you invest your time, your attention, your energy, your finances? If those things become more available and more accessible to the few around you, well, your priorities might have to shift. Right? You might have to make time for the few instead of just trying to find time for them. You might have to invest energy or attention in someone and get nothing in return. Are those real risks? Yes, absolutely. But have you ever stopped to think, what's at risk if you don't invest what God has entrusted to you in the few that he has placed near you? See, they miss out on receiving what Jesus has to offer them through your investment. you miss out on the purpose and presence of Jesus getting infused into who you are and what you do. Again, Jesus is not just about, hey, go do this. Jesus invites us to be and become someone who then, because that's who we are, this is what we're able to do. Jesus isn't just wanting to give our actions purpose. He wants to give our lives meaning and purpose that's bigger and better and beyond anything we could ever comprehend. Are there risks for us making power moves like Jesus? Yes. And the reality is, if there weren't any risks, we would have done it already. If there weren't risks involved, this wouldn't be a problem. We wouldn't have to preach this. This wouldn't have to be our sermon series leading up to Easter because we'd all be doing this. But here's the really important truth in this, okay? Making power moves to reach the lost ones in our lives doesn't mean we just ignore the risks involved. It means we refuse to let the real risks talk us out of making those power moves like Jesus. We refuse to let them talk us into disqualifying ourselves from participating in the mission and the movement that Jesus invites us into. If Jesus has called you into it, he's qualified you for it. The only person disqualifying you is you. Jesus says, you're ready. Jesus says, you've got what it takes. You've got what you need. The only one disqualifying, the only one saying, I don't think I can do this, is you. And so that drops us into what we're going to be talking about today. So go ahead and grab your Bible, slip over to Mark chapter 4. Because this is power move number 3. And really, if those first two power moves of kind of changing geography and investing in a few, if those felt risky, this is the riskiest one yet, right? It might be one of the riskiest ones out of all the power moves that Jesus makes. Power move number 3 is cross to the other side. And kind of the summation of this is that comfort builds up walls that separate us from the people that Jesus wants to reach. Courage breaks walls down by moving us towards them. Again, Mark chapter 4. Where we're going to be picking up in Mark 4 is at the end of a full day of Jesus. He's teaching people on the shoreline of this Sea of Galilee, right, which is really just kind of a big lake. But Jesus had spent the entire day teaching and preaching and healing and doing all kinds of amazing things, right? And this is at the end of the day. So Jesus is probably pretty tired. His disciples are probably pretty tired. They're thinking, hey, it's time to shut this thing down, go to bed, right? Here's what Jesus says. Mark chapter 4, verse 35. It says, on that day that Jesus had spent all day teaching, when evening had come, he said to them, let's go across to the other side. Now just time out right here. Because this moment, right, may not seem significant to us, but this would have been kind of a needle scratch, like drop moment. It would have been one of those moments back in this day. Like you have to picture it. Again, full day. Sun up to sundown, taking care of people, teaching people. It's time to shut things down for the day. It's time to clock out and go home. Everybody's kind of gearing up, thinking, man, finally we're going to be able to put our feet up, just kind of unpack the day. What an amazing day it's been. And then Jesus says, hey guys, I know what we can do. Let's go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. What? What did he just say? Did he say we should go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee? Now, just so we've got kind of a better picture of what's about to happen, the Sea of Galilee is really more like a big lake than a sea. Like when we think sea, we think massive body of water, but the Sea of Galilee at its widest point, it's only about 8 miles from one side to the other. Where Jesus and his disciples are, it's about half that, about 5 or 6 miles from one side to the other. From a place like Capernaum, which is on the western side, which is where they were, they could see the eastern side really easily. So the issue isn't that they've got to traverse or cross some huge, uncrossable body of water. That's not the problem. And also, when you stop to think about it, at least 4 of Jesus' closest disciples, they're professional fishermen, right? They work on the water for a living. They know the Sea of Galilee really well. They have their own boats, and they know how to use them. So the problem with going to the other side isn't that they lack the experience or they lack the equipment needed to get from one side to the other. They're plenty qualified to make that trip. They're facing 3 problems when it comes to crossing to the other side. The first one is, what is on the other side? The second one is, who is on the other side? And the third one is the walls that comfort had built up between them and the other side. And this is a culture of comfort. This is a culture that says, stay away from difficult things and just do things that make sense and are easy. See, in the ancient Jewish religious system, there were two kinds of people. There were Jews, people from Israel. They were considered to be religious and spiritual insiders. And then there are Gentiles. That's everyone else. They were considered to be religious and spiritual outsiders. The Jewish religious leaders, what they had taught is that God is for the insiders. He's not for the outsiders. And beyond that, the Jewish religious law said that the way of life, right? The Jewish way of life is spiritually and ethically and morally clean. The Gentile way of life, the outsider way of life, is spiritually, ethically, and morally unclean. And so the way of life on the other side wasn't just seen as different, it was seen as wrong. That's not just different, that's bad. That's wrong. And again, the religious leaders taught that God goes to the kinds of places and stays with the kind of people who are clean. God avoids, he stays away from people that are unclean. And according to the religious law, if a clean person went into an unclean place, an unclean land, an unclean territory, or if they came in contact with a person who was deemed unclean, now that clean person is considered to be unclean. And they are shunned and avoided just as if they were always unclean, and they'll stay unclean until they go through all these religious ceremonial processes and practices to become clean again. So the what on the other side is unclean territory. God doesn't go there. The who on the other side is unclean people. God isn't for them. And now that we can see, right, the other side wasn't just unfamiliar territory that was too far away. It was forbidden territory that was walled off and intentionally avoided, which means this: Jesus isn't inviting them to cross a body of water, he's inviting them to cross into another culture. We're not just crossing a lake or a sea, we're crossing human categories. And in doing so, they're going to confront everything that they had ever been taught about who God is, who he's actually for, and where God is actually willing to go. So they weren't just crossing a lake, they were crossing categories of life. They were crossing from insider to outsider. They were crossing from clean to unclean. They were crossing from safe and comfortable to really, really uncomfortable. See, comfort builds walls, cultural walls, spiritual walls, religious walls, categorical laws. Courage breaks them down. Let's pick up verse 36. It says, after leaving the crowd, they took Jesus in the boat just as he was. Just circle, if you got your Bible or a Bible app, just circle, highlight, and underline that, like last little line, that Jesus got in the boat just as he was. Mark is really intentional about making sure that we know that there was nothing added to Jesus. Right? Jesus didn't go like, all right, man, we're going to the other side. I need to go home and I need to get my game uniform on. Right? I need to make sure I got my right shoes, my right clothes, like I'm ready to go. No, Jesus got in the boat after a full day of preaching and teaching and healing and touching broken people, healing sick people. Jesus was dirty. He was tired. He didn't go clean himself up first and then get in the boat. He didn't take a beat, didn't go, hey guys, I just need a quick power nap. Actually, he takes one here in a minute, which is kind of cool. But he just gets in the boat and he goes. And Mark wants to make sure that we know this, that there's nothing extra about Jesus here. It's not Jesus and, it's just Jesus. And he says this, the other boats were with him. And it says that a great windstorm arose. So they're making their way across the Sea of Galilee, already not supposed to go there, right? And now they encounter a windstorm. And the Bible, again, in this, it's more than just a storm. This is actually an evil spiritual force that is pushing back against them. And it says that the waves were breaking into the boat, so the boat was filling up with water, but Jesus was in the stern, the back of the boat, asleep on a cushion. So, power nap came, again, about halfway into the journey. Jesus, again, finished a full day of teaching. He was physically tired. And I love this. Jesus being asleep on the boat tells us more than just he had spent a long day dealing with people. It tells us that Jesus is not stressed about getting ready to break every cultural and religious rule in the book. He's so not worried about that he's just, hey guys, I'm going to head to the back of the boat and rest for a little bit. Jesus is literally not losing sleep over breaking all the rules, right? He's not concerned about this spiritual resistance, this storm that is pushing back against them. He's not worried about that. The disciples, however, they're freaking out about all of it, right? They're just like us. Like, we knew we shouldn't have tried to cross this sea. Like, this was a bad idea. We were never supposed to go here. And it says this, they woke him up and they told him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Again, kind of read into this more than just like it was, Jesus, we're all going to die. Like, do something. And Jesus, you imagine, he woke up. It says he awoke, kind of scratched the sleepy out of his eyes. Like, guys, like I told you, I just needed 15 minutes. It was like 10. And then he says he rebuked the wind and he said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased. And there was a great calm. Before this moment, the storm felt so powerful to the disciples. Again, they're like us. The storms of resistance that we fear, the storms of risk that we fear, the pushback, the resistance, right, of us making these kinds of moves, that feels powerful. It feels scary. It felt scary to them. It feels scary to us. But here's what we learn in this moment. The storm and the evil behind the storm, they weren't in charge. Jesus was. And Jesus still is. And Jesus looks at him, and I kind of almost like picture him like he's in the front of the boat at this point. Like he went from the back to the front, and it like almost one of those yawns, like, ugh, right? Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? And it says, they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" And we could stop right here and go, that's an amazing story. But there's so much more. Flip over, chapter 5, starting in verse 1. It says, so they arrive on the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. And here's what you need to know about that. It's where they're not supposed to be. They're in a place they're not supposed to be, and the people that live in the place where they're not supposed to be, they're not supposed to come in contact with those people. Unclean territory, unclean people. And it says, Jesus climbs out of the boat, and a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from tombs to meet them. Now they're in contact with an unclean person. We're already in unclean territory. Now we're in contact with an unclean person. In the minds of the disciples, this is a worst case scenario. Like the other side welcome wagon, the greeting committee, was a naked man that lived in a cemetery. He's religiously unclean as well, right? The law said you're not allowed to touch dead things. This guy lives among dead things. He lived, Mark says, he lived in burial caves. And he could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrist. He smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. If the storm was scary, this guy is downright dangerous, right? He is socially and relationally exiled. He is cut off from his family. He's cut off from his community. He's cut off from whatever God he decided to worship. He wasn't just living outside of a town. He was living outside of humanity. He was an outsider who was exiled by outsiders. And Mark tells us day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. His existence was pain. He wasn't just going through a season, which I know is kind of like the fun Christian buzzword when things start going a little off the rails. Well, I'm just going through a season. Are you going through a season? This guy wasn't going through a season. If you would have said, "Sir, are you going?" He would have just punched you, right? This wasn't a phase that was going to pass. This was his life. His existence was pain. From sunup to sundown, day and night, Mark says. If there was ever a person that everyone had given up on, it was this man. He was a case study for being too broken. He was a case study of there is such a thing as being too far gone. He's a case study for being too messed up. He's a case study for saying it's too late for someone like him. This man was everything that the disciples had been taught to fear and avoid He was who they were told God avoided. God's not for people like that. But all of that just got blown up in an instant. Why? Because Jesus, who is God, just brought his disciples across a sea and through a storm to reach the kind of man that no one in any culture would have been willing to cross the street for. Even his own people put him out to die. They put him among dead things that were already dead because to them, he was already dead. He was as good as dead. There was no hope. He's a lost cause. But while everyone else saw something to avoid, Jesus saw someone to restore. Let's pick back up verse 6. It says, when Jesus was still some distance away, it gets weirder, right? The man ran to him, right, and bowed low before him, and with a shriek he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." The storm knew Jesus was in charge, and so did the evil spirits. Jesus had already said to the guy, already said to the spirit, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion." And just so you know, this area, right, was an area that was kind of under like Greco-Roman influence. And so even this name Legion was a term. It was a term for the Roman military group. A legion of soldiers in the Roman army was anywhere between 2,000 and 6,000 troops. And he says, "My name is Legion because there are many of us inside this man." Somewhere between 2,000 and 6,000. Then the evil spirits begged Jesus again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs. Just happenstance, large herd of pigs feeding on a hillside. Look over there. And they said, "Send us into those pigs," the spirits begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus, get this, gave them permission. "I'll allow it." The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pig, and the entire herd of 2,000 pigs plunged down a steep hillside into the lake and drowned. I told you, it gets weirder, right? You can say what you want about Jesus, but you cannot say he's boring. Only Jesus' disciples could watch a herd of 2,000 pigs jump off a cliff and drown in a lake and be able to say, "That's not the craziest thing we've seen today." It's somewhere in the mix, right, of a crazy, naked, demon-possessed God running around in a graveyard, almost dying in a storm, Jesus sleeping through that storm, and then stopping that storm with his word. Not sure that gets any more stranger or uncomfortable than this. Let's finish the story. It says this in verse 14. The herdsmen, the pig owners, they ran away. They fled to a nearby town surrounding the countryside. They spread the news as they ran. So as they're going, you just imagine like, "This is the craziest thing we've ever seen," right? People rushed out to see what had happened, and a crowd soon gathered around Jesus. They saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, thousands of evil spirits. He was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were afraid. See, prior to this moment, the walls that were built up around this man deemed him as permanently unclean, unstable, unreachable. But Jesus crossed a sea. He silenced a storm. He broke through religious and social boundaries and walls to prove there is no such thing as unredeemable and unreachable. Comfort builds up walls. Courage breaks them down. Then those who had seen what happened, they told others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. Craziest thing. You'll never believe it. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus, "Go away. Like, leave us alone." And you got to imagine at that moment, the disciples were like, "Wait, what? Like, we just got here, right? And now they're telling us to go away?" And Jesus is like, "Come on, guys, let's go." "That's it? Like, we're not even going to stay? Like, we didn't even get off the shore." Jesus gets in the boat. And the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with Jesus. Wouldn't you? That's something that hit me this week. I would too. Why? Because, like, I was left for dead. My own people gave up on me. I was so dead to them, they just put me among dead things. I don't want to go back there. I want to go with you. But Jesus says, "No, go home to your family and tell them everything that the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been." And it hit me this week. See, I think in the past we could read that and go, "Jesus, come on, man, like, let the guy go with you. He's got nothing. He's got nobody." The truth is, he had nothing. He had nobody. Because now, because of what Jesus has done, he can finally go back home. This man who had been cast out and left for dead can finally go back home. The walls that this comfort culture built up to keep this man out had been broken down by Jesus. And Jesus' courage to cross the other side. There's now nothing holding this man on the outside anymore. He's not surrounded by walls. He's not surrounded by this cultural jail cell, this religious jail cell. Jesus broke down those walls, so now he can go back to his family. And it says the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region. It's called the Decapolis. It means 10 cities. And among those 10 towns on the other side, in unclean territory among unclean people, this guy began to proclaim the great things that Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed at what he told them. And it says Jesus got in the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake where a large crowd gathered around him, or on the shore on the other side. You can imagine the people on the other side are like, what happened? Like, we're not supposed to go over there. What was it like? And the disciples are like, we can't even, right? Like, we almost drowned. Jesus slept. Then he woke up. Then he spoke. And the storm stopped. That's not even the craziest thing. There's a naked guy that was in a graveyard, and then just 2,000 pigs just jumped off a cliff. No. Yeah. Crazy stuff. And this was just a little day trip, right? No big deal. A lot can happen with Jesus in less than 24 hours. But before we wrap this up, I need us to see the effect and the result of crossing to the other side, the result that this has. See, in Mark chapter 7 and 8, we don't have time to go through it today, but you can read it later. In Mark 7 or 8, we see Jesus and his disciples, they circle back to this same place, the region of the Gerasenes on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Mark 7 and 8 would have been several months, maybe up to a year after what we just read. So about a year later, Jesus and his disciples, they circle back to this same territory where all this crazy stuff just happened. And in Mark 7 and 8, here's what happens. We see Jesus feeds a crowd of 4,000 people who had come out to see him on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Now, that number 4,000, back in these days, they only counted the men. So when you think about the women and the kids, it's easily more like 8,000 plus. So close to 10,000 people. Where do you think those 8,000 to 10,000 people on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, where do you think they heard about Jesus? Who told them about Jesus? The one guy that Jesus was willing to cross a sea to reach. The irreparably broken, impossibly hopeless, unredeemable man left for dead. The man that Jesus repaired, restored, and redeemed, who was sent back by Jesus into the place that he came from. This man, this demon-possessed man, was actually the first missionary sent by Jesus. No training, no platform. All he had was the story about the day Jesus showed up in his life. Never underestimate what Jesus can do through one changed life. The most unlikely person became one of the most effective missionaries in all of history. Jesus will call us into uncomfortable places, armed with just our stories to reach the unlikeliest people who can do the most unimaginable kingdom work you've ever thought of. Jesus' courage breaks down walls that a culture of comfort tried to build, and now because of one man's story, thousands of unclean people who had been told, God doesn't go where you go and God isn't for you. Thousands of unclean people in an unclean territory who had been labeled and who believed that they were outsiders are now sitting with Jesus. You don't get more insider than that. And for the first time, they're seeing the truth. God is willing to reach the outcasts and meet the outsiders where they are as they are. Comfort builds up walls that keep us from those that Jesus wants to reach. Courage breaks them down and moves us towards them. So let's land the plane. Why should you care about any of this? Here's why. You may not be aware, but comfort, if left unchecked and unchallenged, will quietly shrink your life. If you stay comfortable, you will also stay contained. The walls that comfort builds around our lives don't make them easier, it makes them smaller. Comfort builds walls around the places we're willing to go and the people we're willing to meet. It's safer to stay in my Christian bubble, in my holy huddle, than it is to become friends with people that don't believe what I do. That's hard work. Comfort says, wall up around the friendships you have and wall out the risky ones. Comfort shrinks the space in your schedule by filling it with routines and patterns that feel safe. It's like, come on, Brad, like, I was tracking with you up until now. Like, I've got work stuff, my spouse has work stuff, then we have family stuff, kids have school stuff, sports. Me too. I know. Well, Brad, that's not safe. That's just life. That's exactly what comfort wants you to believe. It is possible for comfort to create a very full life that's also very small. And it's simple physics, right? Something that's small doesn't take much to fill up. If you allow comfort to shrink the space for mission in your life, then you're also allowing comfort to shrink the space for meaning in your life. And here's the gut punch that put me on the floor this week. Comfort, what it does is it convinces us to settle for a small version of Jesus that fits our lives instead of the real Jesus that wants to courageously lead our lives. And that's one of those moments where, like, all God's people said, ouch. Let me just say this. If the version of Jesus that you're currently following never courageously leads you out of your comfort zone, if that version of Jesus always stays on your side, always agrees with you, always tells you to surround yourself with people who are like you and do the same, let me just say this. You're not following Jesus at all. You're actually following yourself. I said we'd circle back to that moment where Jesus was in the boat just as he was. That's all the disciples had. All they had with them was the real Jesus, not their own personal versions of Jesus. And the real Jesus was enough to get them over to the other side and get them back. The real Jesus turned an encounter with one impossibly broken person into a rally of thousands. And can I just say this? You are someone that Jesus wants to hop in with just as he is, so that he can take you to the lives of other people right where they are and just as they are. But you have to be willing to trust him. That he can get you there and he can get you back. If you've added anything to your version of Jesus, it's not the real Jesus. One of my good friends, Shelby Shutt, she says, Jesus plus nothing equals everything. I love that. It's just a simple equation. Jesus plus anything equals nothing. But Jesus plus nothing equals everything. So what does it look like to cross the other side? How do you do that this week? Let me just ask you this. Where's the place or who's the person that you've been avoiding? Maybe it's somebody who has a different political stance than you. Can I just tell you, there is no aisle in heaven? Maybe it's someone who their skin color is different than yours. They live in a different community than you. Can I just tell you? All nations, all tribes, all tongues, all cultures are invited to worship Jesus and will be present in heaven. Jesus doesn't avoid them, so why should we? ask yourself this: why have I been avoiding that person? What has comfort culture led you to believe about them that's not true? And what's the truth that Jesus declares about them? Everything about that one guy, everything about that man, the disciples had been led to believe this is wrong, this is bad, he's bad, God's not for him, God can't help him. Jesus declares with his actions and with his words. Let me show you just who God is for. And let me show you where God is willing to go. So why have you been avoiding this person or maybe this place? What has comfort culture led you to believe is true about them? And in light of knowing this now that God is for them, what would choosing courage over comfort lead you to do this week? Church, I'll just tell you this. The other side of our lives isn't far away. It just feels, for some reason, like it's been forbidden before now. Just like the disciples, the other side wasn't far away, it was just forbidden. The same Jesus who crossed over then is still calling you to get in the boat with him and cross over now. The same Jesus that hopped into the boat with his disciples then wants to hop into your life right now. Comfort builds walls, but courage breaks them down. So, church, let us be the ones who are willing to cross to the other side. Let us be the church that is courageously willing to cross to the other side, to reflect the love and mercy and grace of Jesus that declares there is no such thing as too late. There's no such thing as too far gone, too broken, too messy, or too lost. Jesus is in charge. Jesus gets the last say, not our sin, not our past, not our present, not our prejudice. Jesus gets the last say. Jesus gets the last word, and he says it's not too late. It's not too late for us to become courageous people, and it's not too late to reach the ones that he loves. So let's hop in the boat. Let's get crazy, right? Who knows what will happen? But Jesus sends you into those places armed with just your story. Hey, let me tell you about the day Jesus showed up in my life, and that, church, is enough. One man took that story and turned it into thousands of people in the same room with Jesus. What can you do? Armed with your story and a postcard that's cut crooked and an Easter jam invitation, what can you do? Who can we get in the same room with Jesus by crossing to the other side? Let's be courageous. I'm going to pray for us. We're going to worship. And in this time, we're also going to take communion. And so the same thing we did with our ministry team huddle this morning, I just want to invite you in this moment, just kind of consider, as you take this cup that's got a piece of bread and juice in it, that bread represents the body of Jesus that was broken for us. The juice represents Jesus' blood that was poured out for us. And our ushers are going to come forward and they're going to start passing. I want you to consider this, right? You don't need to add anything to this communion, right? You don't need to add any element to this for Jesus to save who you are and secure your eternity. You don't need anything more than the body and the blood of Jesus. So what would it look like as you take communion today? Where would Jesus, just as he is, where would he take you? What would Jesus, just as he is, do in your life if you just took him just as he is? If you went with him just as he is and just as you are. If you trusted in him just as he is and just as you are. What could Jesus do? Where would he take you? What could you do together? So in this time, I'll pray. We're going to worship. If you want to accept Jesus for the first time, if maybe you've been investigating Jesus for a while and you want to put your trust in Jesus, we would love to pray with you and chat with you about what that looks like. You can meet me down front. We've got our prayer team crew in the back. They would love to meet you and chat with you there. If you need prayer, we'd love to pray with you. I'd love to pray with you up front, or you can pray with our folks in the back. We can also do all this at our discovery table right after service. If kind of coming down in front of people or getting up in front of people feels a little scary, don't worry. We can do it right after service. If you want to join our church, if you want to be a part of this family, this is also the time to do that. Meet me down front, or we can chat in the back after service. I'm going to pray, we're going to take communion, and then we're going to worship. Jesus, we love you. And this morning, we are so grateful for your courage that was willing to cross to the other side of our brokenness. Jesus, the reason that we are here, Jesus, the reason that we know you, Jesus, the reason that for those of us in the room are believers in you is because you were willing to cross into our lives when we were a mess. And we could try to pretend that we weren't. But Jesus, you know the truth. And so there is no such thing as too messy, too broken, or too late. So in this moment, Jesus, as we hold this cup that has this piece of bread and this juice that represents you just as you are, would we allow the you, Jesus, just as you are, to jump into our lives just as we are and do what you can do? Redeem, restore, renovate. Lead us courageously into places that our culture tells us to avoid. Move us into proximity of people that may be different. We don't believe what we believe. Live where we live, look like we look. Because Jesus, there is no culture in heaven other than kingdom culture. And you say everyone's invited. May we do your work. Courageously break down walls, Jesus. Remove us from places of comfort so that we can engage in your kingdom. We love you. I pray all this in your name. Amen.